Hello everybody, I am the Chess Strategist and welcome back to another video. And today we are going to be playing another Templars 5 Rapid Speedrun. And in our last game we had a very interesting game where our opponent was very slow with their movements, and we were able to get a leg up in the end game against them. And when the position looked pretty lost for our opponent, he ended up flagging and we were able to get the win. And today I am looking to show you guys some new strategies, new ideas within the openings that we already know, and maybe show you a new opening if our opponent allows it. Usually we get either, we're getting e4 when our opponents have white, and we get a very simple defense when we play e4 or d4 ourselves. So let's see what we get today. And I have been working on some stuff in the background. It still hasn't come to light yet. I'm sorry about that, guys. But new videos and new video ideas are coming soon. And we're playing against Ray Aquis with the white pieces. And I think we went with d4 last game. Let's go with e4 this game. And our opponent does go for the Caro-Kann. Now there's a few different ways to play the Caro-Kann. The way I like to play is called the short variation of the Caro-Kann. So short variations, first of all, starts off with putting two pawns in the center. And we're expecting our opponent to advance, and they do. They play d5. And the short variation is part of the advanced Caro-Kann. And the advanced Caro-Kann is considered by the computer and many players the best defense to the Caro-Kann. So we are going to play e5 here. And we are going to see what our opponent goes for. They go for the traditional bishop to f5. And we are going to go with the short variation, which starts with knight f3. Our opponent goes with e6. And short variation continues with bishop to e2. Alright, and it looks like our opponent has played h6, disallowing this bishop move. But that's not a move that we're super concerned about anyways. We can continue. And one of the nice ways to continue in this position involves playing the move c4. There's also castling in this position. And I like castling. I think castling is just a nice way to continue. Leave our options open. Alright, and now that our opponent has played c6 and then c5, we can break with c4. And now our queen, if it's traded, is going to be able to be captured back with the rook, which is nice. So we're going to keep control of the file, and that's the most important thing. We want to keep control of the file. So why does this move make sense? Well, our opponent is trying to chip away at our d4 pawn, chip away at our center here. And if we allow them to just chip away at our center and we don't strike back, we're going to have a problem. Now we've decided to we've decided to chip away at their center as well, so we're going to have symmetrical kind of chipping away of the center, and whoever's more developed is going to be able to take advantage of that. In this position, that's probably going to be us. Alright, and here we are going to go with bishop to e3 to defend this pawn on d4. So you've got one attacker, two attackers, three. We've got one defender, two defenders, three. We're also threatening now to play this move pawn takes c5, where the bishop is not enough defense. So our opponent is going to have to make a decision here very quickly about what they want to do with this pawn. Do they want to defend it with a move like b6, or do they want to take and liquidate? Alright, and our opponent has decided to go for the move queen to b6, creating an attack on the b2 pawn. And what do we want to do here? That is the big question. Well, first of all, we need to involve our queen somehow here. I'm thinking queen to d2 is a nice move here. First of all, we have to defend this b2 pawn. And there hasn't been another attacker added, thankfully, to this pawn. We certainly don't want to take, because we allow this bishop to develop with tempo. Alright. We can reinforce the pawn again. Our opponent really is running out of ways to put pressure on this pawn. Notice here how our opponent's king is still basically stuck in the center, and we're going to be able to advance eventually here. Alright. And here our bishop comes in, creating an attack on the queen. Alright. And knight captures. We're going to capture back with our knight. Alright. What's the tactic here? First, we're going to give this check here. As a long line I've calculated, we're going to see how our opponent wants to respond to this check. Alright, and our opponent does step over here. And now we're going to be able to give this check right here. We're going to see how our opponent responds. They can capture with the bishop, they can capture with the knight. And this is a very long line I just calculated. Starting with this move, bishop to b5. And our opponent, I feel like, has played this wrong. Allowing us to move this knight with check is the linchpin in this strategy. We want to move the king to a square where it can be checked by the knight. And we can reveal this devastating battery that we have on the rook here. The rook is undefended within the bounds that we need it to be. So I think maybe king to e7 is an optimal move here. Here we go. We are able to win material here in this position. Alright. And notice how strong our bishop is, or sorry, not bishop. Notice how strong our rook is here. First of all, we're creating an attack on this pawn. Second of all, we're pinning the knight. The knight cannot develop. Even if it wanted to develop, it doesn't even have a square it can go to. The king's blocking the square, and this other square is being blocked by the pawn. And we're just having a great time. We can start developing our pieces, starting with our knight. And our moves here are very, very simple. We develop our knight, attack the bishop. We're going to play rook to d1, and we're going to have this rook invade along the file here too. And it's going to be an excellent position very quickly. And it's all based on this tactical sequence that we saw earlier. And this position here, this position right here is a very scary one to be playing. It looks like your knight's lost. I mean, he's got 3 attackers. We've got 2 defenders. We can't add another attacker. So we give a check, and our opponent can't move to here because of this. Can he block? Well, he can block with a rook, and that's probably the best he can do. He ends up going down in exchange anyways. But let's see what our opponent did here. They move the bishop back. And again, we are up material, so trading is optimal for us. So let's go for it. And we've got a very sticky situation over here with our opponent's knight. So any trades are really going to be in our favor because our opponent, they can't really develop these pieces over here. These pieces are stuck. The knight cannot move because it's pinned to the rook, and the rook can't move because we lose defense of the knight. So it's a very sticky situation for our opponent, and our rooks are going to start to invade here. Starts to gain a lot of momentum. And all right, first move I'm seeing here is knight to e4, creating an attack on this bishop. Also threatening to control this f6 square again. And what else can we do here? Now this move, rook to d6, would be bad because of rook to c7. Although we can pin the bishop in that position. And I do like that. Pinning the bishop to the king is an optimal move in that position. So we're going to leave this position. We're going to leave that idea that this is not a good move because of this. Now that we have the response, rook to b7. So notice how I saw that. I immediately refuted my own idea by seeing this bishop c7 move, but then I saw, is there anything in that position? And so we get the position on the board. Perfect illustration. This happens all the time. I refute my own move. I say this isn't going to work, and then I go, wait, is there a way to make this work? Yes, there is a move, and it's this move, rook to b7, creating a pin on the bishop. So this move is illegal. And does he have a way to defend this bishop is the question. And when you really look at it, he doesn't. So we're able to get a quick win. And it's because of tactical calculations. Now, this game is a kind of game that you play when you do a lot of calculation and you see a lot of lines and you go for one and your opponent just can't respond. And what we want to do here is really start breaking this down. So let's go from the start. We've got e4, and we get a Caro-Kann advanced variation. Advanced variation as in we advanced our pawn. Now there's a few different ways to play the Caro-Kann. There's taking, which is called the Caro-Kann exchange variation. There's advancing, which is what we played. There's also a line where you exchange and then you play c4, and this is called the Panov attack. There's other lines where you defend with a knight or with a pawn. This one's called the fantasy variation. And this one's called the classical variation of the Caro-Kann. So there's a whole bunch of different variations. Today we played the most popular at the highest level, and this is the one that's recommended by the computer when you check it, is the advanced variation. And there's a few different ways to play the advanced variation for black. The two main moves here are bishop to f5 and then also c5. So it's two different ideas. This one's called the Botvinnik-Karls variation, where basically you sacrifice a pawn with hopes to regain the pawn very quickly, and you usually do, and that position is very viable. The main line though is bishop to f5, and when the opponent plays the main line of the advanced Caro-Kann, we respond with knight f3, the short variation. So the short variation I like for a few reasons. First of all, you get quick development. Your pieces are on nice, strong, active squares, and you always have the ideas of breaking in the center with c4. And you just have a nice, slight advantage that you can start playing with. Tactical positions start to develop, and you're able to develop a lead very quickly. And your opponent goes with e6. We go with the traditional move, bishop e2. Just preparing to castle. Notice our bishop does move again when we play c4, but we're not super concerned about the tempo. We just want to have options. And here, the option to castle is too nice not to give up. Our opponent kind of wastes a turn with h6, so we get an extra turn to develop. And then they go with c5 on the next move, even though I think c5 before h6 is probably infinitely better. I think c5 before h6 Um, I mean, that's the move you need to play to free yourself from this dark squared bind that we have. So our opponent plays c5, and in this position, I haven't checked the engine lines in forever. I used to study this opening all the time, but I believe the best move is c4, and we did play the best move c4. And notice how we're already a lot better because of the inclusion of this h6 move. Without h6, this would be a main line. With h6, it is not a main line anymore, but we just have a much better version, or our opponent has lost the tempo. So, opponent goes for d takes c4, and we play bishop takes c4, which is not the most prudent option according to the engine. But I want to look at this without the engine for now. Opponent plays knight c6, and we develop our bishop to e3. Now, what I like about this move is, first of all, it gets our bishop into the game, and second of all, we're forcing our opponent to make a choice. They have to defend this pawn somehow. How they choose to do it is going to be telling. Our opponent has a pretty good idea. They want to play queen b6 and then rook d8. So they want to create a lot stronger of an attack on our d4 pawn, and that's what our opponents do in the Caro-Kann. Is they want to attack this d4 pawn with everything they have, and by winning the d4 pawn, they hope that the e5 pawn will fall as well. So we defend our pawn on b2, also clearing up a square for our own rook. We both develop our rooks, so now we're equally attacking and defending the pawn. Opponent takes, we take, trade a whole bunch of pieces, and then our opponent plays this bishop c5 move. Now, I have to be honest, when I saw this position at first, I was really quite scared. I thought this was going to be just like a very bad position for us, because it looked like there's no way to defend the knight. And when you see that, immediately you have to start thinking, wait, there's no way to defend this knight. Where's the tactical solution in this position? Notice how our king is castled and our opponent's king is not. Our opponent's king is vulnerable to all sorts of attacks that can allow us to gain the advantage. And here I started seeing the idea of, I wish I could move my knight with check. So the first move I calculated was this move here. Knight takes f5. So I saw this, and I saw this check, and I realized that no matter what here, we're kind of just screwed. Like, we're going to lose our queen. Opponent still has a queen. We have better development, yes, but our opponent's going to develop their pieces very quickly. Oh, how exactly? But probably knight here, rook over. And they're going to be equal, if not better, very quickly in development. They're actually winning. So that move got scrapped. Then I saw this check. Now this check is nice, because first of all, his light squared bishop is out of the picture. He can't block this check. His pawns are also out of the picture. He can't block this check with any of pawns. So he's going to have to move his king here or block with a rook. Blocking with a rook, I mean, it's easy to see why this is a great position. The king is in the line of fire of our battery. We can just take this, and he has to move his king. And we're just winning free pieces. So this position obviously is excellent for us. He can't block with the rook. So he's got to move his king. Well, what squares are available? This and this. And what do both of those squares have in common? Well, they can both be checked by my knight. So if we got king to e7, we would give this check here, from which our opponent would probably take. And here we could just trade away all our pieces almost. And we're starting to get a decent position here. What I like most about this position is our rook's coming out. We have a pawn here in the center. It's very strong. We've got this doubled pawn we can attack as well. And we just have much better development, cleaner piece play, and a very strong path towards a win in this position. So this position I thought was probably better than what we ended up, or better for our opponent than what he ended up playing. He ends up playing this move here, which allows us to go for this sacrifice. And here's the difference. In the last position, our opponent's king was still defending the rook, so we weren't going to win a rook or win an exchange. Now I see the king is not defending this rook, it's actually hanging. If you look, there's two attackers and only one defender. So as long as we can move this knight with check, we're going to be able to win the exchange there, because we're sacrificing a knight and then we win a rook. So here we go for this move. Opponent takes the bishop, we take, and we are up a rook. up in exchange. King goes to e7, which is the only move, and we slide our rook over, forcing our opponent to do something about this pawn here. And this rook is just the linchpin of our entire position. First of all, it's creating pressure on this pawn here. Second of all, it's pinning the knight, restricting the rook's movement. So these pieces aren't developed at all, and they're not going to be developed for a long time. I mean, the knight literally has no square to even move to, even if it wanted to. And this is the power of development and active piece play. If you can get developed to a point where your pieces are creating threats, and your opponent's pieces haven't even got out in the door yet, they can't move. They get paralyzed. And this position is practically indefensible for black. I mean, you can look at the engine. It's plus 5.6. Plus, the engine likes it more and more as it calculates. And the engine thinks this is better and better. Engine thinks we need to strike with f6 immediately so that this knight can be developed. Engine thinks don't even defend the pawn. Just strike with f6 so that you can even start developing your pieces. Which I think is really telling that we'll just sacrifice another pawn just to get these pieces developed, because these pieces being useless is, I mean, it's bleeding the clock here. And so our opponent decides to actually defend this b7 pawn with their bishop. We see this as an opportunity to gain a free tempo. Well, we see that move and we just take. Again, we're up material, our pieces are more developed, and if he wants to trade his actively developed pieces for ours, we're going to be left with this rook pinning these two, and that sounds great to me. We go with rook d1, seizing the only open file in the position, threatening to penetrate to many positions. First of all, I mean, we can just go straight to d8 and win this knight. Well, first we decide to develop our knight. Knight forces this bishop to drop back to b6. Our rook infiltrates here. And I saw this move thinking, hey, we're creating pressure on this pawn here. We're creating pressure on this pawn here. We're creating all sorts of pressure. Our knight's going to be able to jump into the center here as well. And we're just kind of swarming around the opponent's pieces, setting up for all sorts of checkmate ideas as well. And here's where you have to be very cautious. So I saw this move, rook d6, and I immediately refuted it. I said, no thanks. This move sucks because of this response. But then I saw rook to b7, and I said, is this position more winning than what I had before? Oh yeah, the engine says it's completely lost. In fact, the engine just found mate in 12. Forced checkmate in 12 moves from this position. So my intuition in this position was right. After I looked at it for a second, I thought this is a winning position. We should 100% go for this, and this is the ending position that we got in the game. Opponent resigned in this position because there's no way to defend this bishop at all. Bishop cannot take because of the pin, and the best move to stave off checkmate the longest is just giving the bishop like this and cowering in the corner while our pieces swarm around and attack the black king from every angle. So I hope this game was a great illustration on calculation and also sometimes second guessing your immediate thoughts about a position. I immediately thought rook d6 was a move that I should never play, but after looking at it for a second, it ends up being the move that wins me the game. So it's these simple thought processes, simple double checking that can get you the difference between a really quick win and a win that drags on for a long time and maybe even fumbles into a draw after a lot of work. So alright guys, I really hope you enjoyed this. Beating the Caro-Kann is, I used to hate playing against the Caro-Kann, but after I learned this short variation, I really enjoyed playing it. It takes our opponent from a place of comfort and safety to a really positional battle that a lot of Caro-Kann players are not ready for. Anyways, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and keep playing chess. See ya.